From our studios at the corner of 8th and Walton in Bentonville, Arkansas, welcome to Saturday Morning Meeting, where we cover Walmart, Sam's Club, and the consumer product companies that are represented on their racks and shelves throughout the country and around the world. I'm Andy Shook, filling in for Derek Ridenauer. Our focus is on the insights, trends, and best practices that will help you as a supplier grow your business with the world's largest retailer. Thank you for joining us. And coming up today, I'll be talking with Mark Trowbridge about neighborhood markets, and Derek will be talking with Shawn Beckwith from Atlas about how a supplier can maximize their analytics. But first, the headlines. The Street reports that over the next 18 months, Walmart plans to open 500 neighborhood markets in the U.S. The expansion of the smaller format stores is part of Walmart's aggressive entry into urban markets, where real estate is at a premium. This week at its Global Sustainability Milestone meeting, Walmart highlighted its progress with the Sustainability Index, a measurement system that tracks the environmental impact of products. By the end of this year, Walmart expects the index will include more than 300 product categories and as many as 5,000 suppliers. As part of its ongoing focus on sustainability, Walmart announced that as of January 31st, 2014, they are moving in the direction of electronic payment for their suppliers. And Walmart is now on the smartphone trade-in bandwagon. Customers can bring in their working smartphones to Walmart stores for an on-the-spot evaluation. Now, users can receive between $50 and $300 in credit for their phones, which can then be applied to the purchase of a new device. This program is also consistent with Walmart's sustainability goals and will help customers recycle smartphones responsibly. According to C-Exchange's green policy, smartphones traded in at Walmart and Sam's Club will never be sent to landfills, domestically or internationally. Suppliers should make sure to trade up to a smartphone with a great camera if they want to make full use of Pinterest, the photo-based social network. The Guardian recently reported on a study showing that Pinterest is the social media platform most likely to drive spontaneous purchases. Walmart just released its holiday top toys list. Now, after consulting the experts, that's 1,000 kids ages 18 months to 10 years, the list includes classics like Barbie's Dream House and Elmo, as well as new toys like the Flutterby Flying Fairy Doll. Walmart is America's largest seller of toys. The standoff between Walmart and Alaskan fishermen continues. According to Wall Street Cheat Sheet, Walmart has declared that it will only purchase fish and seafood certified by London's Maine Steward Council. Many Alaskan salmon fisheries have dropped the certification, choosing to rely on Alaska's own strict standards for salmon fishing. Alaskan fishermen and their supporters argue that if Walmart really wants to offer made in the USA products, it ought to continue offering Alaskan salmon in its stores, with or without the certification. When we come back, we'll talk with Mark Trowbridge about neighborhood markets and the 500 stores that are going to be here in the next 18 months.
Cameron Smith & Associates is Supplier's first choice in recruiting the competitive Walmart supplier job market. We connect qualified candidates to CPG jobs in Northwest Arkansas and across the country. CSA also sources sales and marketing professionals for companies providing advertising, marketing, merchandising, and data management services to suppliers. Contact us today at csarecruiters.com.
Today's show has been sponsored in part by 8th and Walton, the premier destination for Walmart supplier education. Since 2006, 8th and Walton's by suppliers for suppliers approach to education and services has helped thousands of supplier teams grow their business with Walmart. Visit 8thandwalton.com to learn more.
All right, well, welcome back. We're here this morning with Mark Trowbridge. Mark Trowbridge spent about 16 years with Walmart, and one of his experiences was with neighborhood markets. And Mark, you were telling me that you came into neighborhood markets after there was about 50 stores, right?
Right.
Well, tell us about those early days and kind of what they did in the beginning.
Well, I tell you, it was actually we tried to create, a lot of people don't know, but neighborhood markets actually started off growing faster than supercenters.
Really?
And people said, supercenters, man, they've grown so fast. But really what's happened is it took about 10 years for Walmart to get the actual concept correct and getting ready to growth. And as you heard yesterday, they have finally announced to the streets that they're going to really start growing this concept. And so during the earlier years, we're just trying to get the box. How does it look right? How do you get it more profitable? Because as you and I were talking a little earlier, you know, a super center has great profits compared to the normal industry of grocery.
Yeah, and you came from Ralph's, right?
I came from
So you had a
Ralph's.
good experience with understanding
Right.
how grocery and that smaller box size and how that works.
Yes.
And so in the early days, you were kind of able to help kind of mold and shape that for Walmart.
And that's what's been fun
Yeah.
about it. It's great to see this concept really growing. And what's sort of fun is a good friend of mine, Mark Phillips, who I hired, is now running that merchandising area.
Okay.
So, in fact, I had lunch with him last week. He's a great guy. In fact, Suppliers, you need to get to know who he is and his team because they're a great team.
Well, they've got 290 stores right now.
That's
right?
correct.
And Bill Simon just announced that they're going to have up to 500 in about 18 months. And that's a pretty big increase. And you're saying 500 stores does what?
500 stores is going to put Walmart Neighborhood Market alone within at least the top 10 grocers in the United States.
Wow. So that kind of changes the playing field.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so.
So you've got two different concepts. You've got the supercenter concept, and now you've got the neighborhood market, the Market Express stores. You know, my experience as a consumer when I first started shopping the neighborhood market stores when we moved to Northwest Arkansas was it was a great supplement to the supercenter, right? Because
Yes.
I didn't really want to go into the supercenter, but the neighborhood market had everything that I wanted in there, and I loved the concept. And when I shopped them back in the early days, 98, 99, 2000, the prices were the same. Then about 5 or 6 years ago, they started messing around with the pricing. Now this was my experience here in
Right.
Northwest Arkansas.
Right.
So I'd go in and I was paying more than when I'd go to a supercenter. I lost confidence in that whole EDLP process and that whole thing because I didn't want to pay more going to a neighborhood market. Do you think Walmart can keep that concept of EDLP and that trust of the consumer there? With putting those neighborhood markets in without
That is going to be a challenge for them,
Yeah.
which you've just admitted. But let me back you up a little bit. They've done some studies, and a normal grocery store shopper will shop a grocery chain for groceries 10 times a month.
Okay.
In a highly concentrated supercenter area, the maximum is around three times, and that's the actual stock-up trip. So
Okay.
that means the other 7 trips, which are the fill-in trips, are actually done by the local grocery stores. So what Walmart has done is they've come in with this concept, the neighborhood market, to try to capture some of those fill-in grocery things. Now, there is a cost to that. And
Yeah.
and I know there's, you know, I can
But
play.
as a consumer, I don't want to pay for that.
I know.
want that.
I can. That's the difficulty of putting
Yeah.
it into a high concentrated supercenter
Yeah.
area. Now, if you take the neighborhood market and you put it out into a non-supercenter
Sure, like
area,
the express stores, right?
then, right.
there's-
But then it looks like, you know, because you're still comparing it to the competition, then it becomes that EDLP. But however, we found that the most profitable is when you're actually putting them in next to the supercenters.
Yeah.
Because you can take and trade inventory back and forth. You don't have to call the supplier and say, hey, can you come pick up, you know, the inventory?
Okay.
Because have you ever been in a back room of a neighborhood market?
Okay, so
It's like a 3-car garage.
exactly, and this is going to be an issue for suppliers, isn't
It
it?
will be.
Because you know, right now they can ship in big full cases of 24s and 12s, and they've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 facings on the shelf. Obviously, the big CPG companies it'll
Yes.
affect more. But you know, how does a supplier really prepare for this kind of growth? Smaller store concept, more like a normal grocery store. They may be doing some business with those already out there, but how do they prepare for that? Because Walmart, I mean, I have a feeling eventually they're going to start putting pressure on. As they get bigger, you know, 500 stores, let's say in 4 years they're at 1,000 of these neighborhood markets, they're going to put pressure on the supplier to make their packages smaller, to make it, you know, make it work better for Walmart.
Now, the thing about it is you have to remember they share the same warehouse
For now.
for now. So that means that, but that's the efficiencies that it
Yeah.
brings. So you've got to be able to have a medium between the supercenter and also the neighborhood market. And
Yeah.
you brought up a good point that first of all, right now there are separate buyers because they're getting ready to grow this concept.
Okay.
So they've pulled out and they've created a whole team buying team that just is centered just on neighborhood markets. So you will find that maybe you call on one buyer for the super centers, and they might accept that product, but the neighborhood market may not. Or you might say, you know what, I can get in the neighborhood market, but I can't get it in the super center.
You know,
so
one of the
you
things
need to
that
know
may,
both buyers.
Well, and what may block that for a supplier is if their package isn't packaged right. In other words, if they've got 12 and it won't fit on the shelf with one facing, so now they can't do case and a half pack out, the neighborhood market can't take it. The express store can't take it.
It makes it very, very difficult for them to take it. Now they're trying to look at some different systems in order to correct that. But again, you have to remember the back room is really drives the front room. And deliveries, the whole concept of the neighborhood market, it goes straight from the truck onto the shelf.
Yep.
And so you just got to keep that in mind. And so as a supplier, you really have to pay attention to this new concept.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it can be very profitable for you as a supplier if you're in both neighborhood markets and also supercenters.
Well, and especially if that's where the growth is going to come over the next,
well, that's where
5
Bill
years,
Simon
10 years.
says it is, and I understand that because that was my whole purpose, was to get this concept ready for where it is going tomorrow.
Well, you got it ready, and I can't wait to see what neighborhood markets do.
Be
I
great.
love the concept. I like them around here where we shop in this area, and I think America's going to love them all throughout the U.S. and depending on where they put them all at.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Mark, hey, thank you so much for coming in today.
You bet.
Stay tuned. When we come back, Derek will be talking with Shawn Beckwith from Atlas about how a supplier can maximize their analytics.
GigWalk is an on-demand mobile workforce that can collect data and do work at retail. Businesses use GigWalk for retail audits, merchandising, and much more. With 350,000 smartphone-enabled workers available on demand, you get unprecedented speed and coverage across the US, Canada, and the UK. And all work is reviewed for quality and accuracy. Visit gigwalk.com to learn more.
Today's show has been sponsored in part by 8th and Walton, the premier destination for Walmart supplier education. 8th and Walton offers a variety of services including new supplier onboarding, scorecard optimization, and analysis and reporting. Visit 8thandwalton.com/services to learn more.
And welcome back to Saturday Morning Meeting, joined now by Shawn Beckwith, the Executive Vice President from the Atlas Group. Shawn, thanks for joining us. Long career with Walmart, 15 years there, a couple years with Shiloh Technology, now with Atlas. So data, kind of your business and what you've done most of your career. What are some of the things that Atlas does that can really help either a new company or even an existing company really improve their business with Walmart?
So the biggest thing we do is we help them understand what to do with the data, right? So whether they get that from the supplier or the supplier's data source, whether it comes from the retailer through Retail Link, it may be target data through Info Retriever, or it could be syndicated data, and basically marrying all that up together and then understanding what insights they can drive out of it. And it could be something as simple as market trends, right? So what's going on in the market that maybe not happening in your prospective team. Okay. So you can go through and identify those trends early on rather than waiting 4 weeks, 5 weeks down the road.
So this is kind of a step beyond POS. What POS data was 20 years ago, This is kind of where things are today, is really looking at those insights. How do you drive trips? How do you get them to spend more?
Right. That's a big piece, right? So you're getting into some consumer behavior. What are they doing when they come to the store? But basically the biggest thing what we want to do is be able to take the level of not necessarily the technical abilities of a team, but what they can do with the business and understanding, and remove the technical piece that plagues a lot of people, right? So a lot of people want to get in and they understand what they want to do. It's just a matter of how do I do it?
Taking those numbers and making them actionable.
Right, that's a huge piece of it, right? So they say Retail Link is kind of like drinking from a fire hose because there's so much data. It's one of the things we see is people that, they built these complex systems with Excel macros and Access databases, but it's very limited in scope. Okay. And getting to understand, put a strategy behind that. What am I going to do with this data long term? What does it tell me? How do I influence business and behavior as a result of having this data now? So it's not a matter of just saying, okay, if I go to Sam's Club and I buy 5 pallets of mayonnaise, then I get home and figure out, I've got a lot of mayonnaise, what am I going to do with it, right? We have a lot of suppliers that do that with data. You know, they know they need the data. They got to have the data. They get the data. Then it's a now what? And the strategy needs to come first, and then data just needs to be part of the solution that you build with it. So that's what we kind of help them do.
With all that data, what are some of the mistakes you've seen suppliers do? Some of the biggest mistakes that they've made?
Biggest thing is underestimating what's available, right? So you get into whether it's just POS data and inventory, but then looking at the correlation between the two, right? So it's more than just what's sold on a particular day, it's what should have sold. Or how does that relate to different markets in terms of inventory levels? So what we try to do is help them bring in things like shipment data, right, to tell the full story. So you shipped it in, does that, even just following the entire supply chain. So you shipped X amount of product to Walmart, did it make it? Once it got to the DC, if you're going through a warehouse replenishment, is it making it all the way into the back room of the store? Is it getting set out? Is it selling? What's the life cycle of that product in the store, and how do you manage that along the way? So that's a lot of stuff going on, and underestimating the ability of the data that's available, especially at Walmart, to manage all that is absolutely there. I think a lot of times people make assumptions based on other retailers, what's available at Walmart, or they make assumptions based on what's available at Target. And the cool thing is we're seeing retailers more and more get more engaged in these demand signals, and they're wanting to supply it, and they're wanting to make it easier. Now some of them are struggling. They're making the investment, so it'll be a long-term thing as we see as from the retailers giving us data and what we can do with it. But like I said, underestimating what you can do with the data. The other thing they do is when they look at it, they think, well, I've got a guy here that's been doing this in Excel and Access, like I mentioned earlier.
Right.
That's a very short-term strategy. Odds are that guy that's doing that, that's not necessarily their core competency. A lot of times it's analytics. That's just the role that they were thrust into.
Right. Well, building pivot tables and access databases it helps you sort the data, but it doesn't help you
but you know,
execute the data.
To be fair, that has grown the business in a lot of suppliers. I don't want to take that away. It has done a lot of good, but realistically what we want to do is we want to turn that analyst into a true analyst, not a data retriever, a data formatter. And it's funny though, the biggest mistake I see in that role, especially when you talk to the management group, is you have these analysts, they spend all their day downloading this data, getting it ready, building these nice, beautiful reports,
Yes.
getting them out the door, only to go to the next report that needs to be done. There's hardly any analytics that's going on with that. They just don't have the time. It's not a matter of what the analyst is capable of, it's just time. You know, they have to get their judged on the reports that need to go out. So what we want to do is to take that away from them a little bit and say, you know what, we will give you the data you need. You don't have to worry about getting it formatted and ready to go. We want to have that ready for you so that you can instantly provide commentary as you need. And then they're able to spend 5 minutes looking at it, 10, 15 minutes adding commentary or insights, and causing action as a result. You know, if certain stores are out of stock, understanding the drivers of why they're out of stock. And being able to
talk a little
dive
bit
into
about
that.
replenishment, but I also want to get into what are some really big wins that you've seen suppliers be able to take the data, look at it, make those assumptions, and then say this is what we need to do, and really have either a great sell-through or increased sales and really move the needle because of data.
A couple great wins, right? So anybody that's in or has anything to do with weather, especially when regards to, like, let's say boating or things like that. Last year we had a very early onset of warm weather. It caused sales to spike, and we saw, especially in the sporting goods area, sales are off the charts and they started dwindling down. Well, they know going into this year that February is going to be tough, right? We weren't having that early.
Lapping it.
Right, so it's coming back around. So they were able to go through and kind of get ahead of that a little bit, right? So one of the key things that I've seen a lot of good wins is ABC class in your items and ABC class in your stores. Especially when you work on replenishment or sales, what items are driving my business, right?
So A items are the ones that are 80% of your business that really drive it. C, not so much, kind of an impulse almost.
And the industry standard is 80-15-5, right? So A class items driving 80% of your sales. What is interesting when you first start showing that to manufacturers is they don't realize how few items that actually is. And typically those aren't the items you're spending your time on. All right, so a good example of that is, do you want to spend time on an A-class item that's at 97% in stock, or do you want to spend time on a C-class item that may be at 92% in stock? So you have to understand the impact of what you're working on. Feed the lions, all right? So I want to make sure that my A-class items are doing well. Well, another concept along that same mode is looking at your stores. So if I look at my stores and I say, okay, which stores are driving my volume? And where this came from, long story to get to this, the sporting goods guy was able to go through and look and say, okay, these stores, 800 stores, make up 70% of my volume. So they were able to take that data and information directly to their replenishment managers. Hey, if you're going to input any negative policy settings, now again, this is directly related to Inform, but it's still a good use of the data. Brought it to their replenishment manager, said if you're going to make any negative policy settings, please don't touch these stores because these are the ones driving our sales. Get everybody into agreement, buy off. Man, as a result, they're having a great year. I mean,
You fix the problem stores.
they fix the problem stores and leave the good stores alone, right?
Which
So
all that,
take them
and
down.
of course that information is available in the retail link, looking at your top stores and your bottom stores, which suppliers should kind of be looking at and be aware of at least.
And it's knowing how to rank. So what do you want to base your ABC on? Is it straight sales? Is it profit margin? What is it the store you're trying to tell the Walmart when you go in? So it's not necessarily your top stores, especially more so on items. It changes a little bit depending on how you look at it, last 4, last 13. Having said that, to get the data to where you need, you have to have something that can store it at that raw level that's not necessarily aggregating it, pre-aggregating it for you. And by that I mean, that's just a fancy way of saying it. It summarizes it and rolls it up.
Okay.
You want to have something that as you want to tell the story, the tool's there to do it for you. It simplifies it.
So what are 3 things that either a new supplier who's probably never done business with Walmart before, what are 3 things that they should focus on, and are those the same that the P&Gs of the world should focus on, and the Unilevers?
Getting back to basics is what a new supplier is going to start off. They're either going to come at 8th and Walton and know what they need to know about Retail Link or managing that item. Getting to basics will solve so many things. We saw that especially within Forum, right? And probably more so you'll see it with GRS as well. And Forum was interesting because it had couple things you could manage and watch, and everything was there for you to see, whether it was your DDs or your profiles. Right. So you had those trips that would tell you if something's out of whack on DD
You'd run a DRA, and not that you would understand it, but you at least could see where something was wrong.
So what we want to do is get them understanding what's driving their business, how the basic mechanics of whatever retailer you're supporting, right? Whether it's Target, Walmart, Walgreens, doesn't matter. Understand the basic mechanics. A lot of people make that mistake. Sometimes new suppliers, when they come in, they're of the mindset, as long as purchase orders keep coming, I must be doing something right. Which you're doing well, but how much better could you be doing? And kind of getting out of that tactical mode more into a strategic mode will help you keep your items on the shelf and grow your business.
I think the thing with Walmart too, when it comes to replenishment, buyers make the deal, they give you the POs, it goes. Replenishment are the basically rebuyers that continue to buy it.
That's right.
And if they're heavy on inventory, heavy on overstock, then that creates problems for suppliers as well in terms of increased inventory, affecting GMROI on their scorecard. Also, depending on the type of items, you're going to get into some out-of-date issues, which result in some pretty good chargebacks, if not markdowns.
Yeah, you're right. And then,
so
leading back to that, so getting back to the basics, know your items, right? I know you had Tom on here. So Tom, way back when, every morning at 5, or even before that, whenever Tom got up, there used to be a guy that would call him every morning and give him his sales numbers. He started the day off before anybody else. He already knew how yesterday performed.
Okay.
And you see a lot of the people that have cycled through, one of the key things that was great about all of them was they knew their numbers. So I would say as a new supplier or even P&G, on your key items, there ought to be somebody responsible that knows how performance is related, how it's trending, and be able to look at that and know when something's off and catch it on a downward spiral before it becomes too late.
Okay.
Right. So know your numbers, know where they should be, know your items, where they should be performing, when they're out of tolerance, and you get somebody into the weeds that knows that. They can tell just by looking at a daily report if something's off. They don't need it to be conditional formatted, which is nice, but they know when something's out of whack, and they can save a pretty big win. I think you had one of those, right? So with GRS,
it was painful. And we got through it. I mean, GRS is a little bit of a tricky animal, and I think once you kind of get the basics and learn some things like SSOs, obviously are not good for that. And we'll talk more about that. But I want to go real quickly into on-shelf availability, which is really a big focus lately for Walmart. They released Spark along with Rockfish and an application now that allows the Crossmarks and Acostas of the world, those third-party suppliers, to really help get it in stock and make sure it's there. What can you? But the key about an OSA is it's got to be in the building, and it's got to be able to be there. What are some things you guys can do to really help drive that?
Well, and I'd back it. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the building, right? So if you have a warehouse item that can be manually ordered, you can still influence behavior. But it's knowing when it's an issue and when it's not. Kind of like we talked about the evolution of POS data. Years past, it was just POS data, then we evolved into syndicated data, and then we brought in shipment data, and now we're getting into social media, right? So understanding how a Facebook campaign or something like that impacts your sales. So there's data everywhere, and you've seen it grow. OSAs kind of come along those same patterns. So you go back years in the past, and it was, if item hadn't sold in 4 weeks, it's an issue, right? And it was a lot of that was just because the systems weren't in place, or people were basically just kind of understanding and growing. So the evolution that we have seen of that is being able to tailor an item in a store and know when it specifically is out of whack, not just as a whole, this item doesn't look right in this market. And being able to drive in results, or be able to drive in a rep as quickly as possible.
Okay.
The other thing that I would say is you need to kind of have your own tactics in place and not rely on your third-party merchandiser, right? There's some great ones out there. There really are. And knowing your items, going back to what I talked about before, you have guys or these third-party merchandisers that are in there 2 or 3 times a week. You have some that are in there bi-weekly, monthly, and so on. Well, if you have a slow-moving item, do you necessarily need somebody in there 3 times a week?
Probably not.
Probably not. If you have a fast-moving item that's selling 400 units per store per week, absolutely, right? Because I want to catch that item 2 days into an issue and fix it, and be able to go find it and be able to pull it out of the back room, get the inventory adjusted, whatever it is. The faster I can get that corrected, you get less into an issue with lost sales than you do lost sales prevention, all right? Okay. So you're not letting it get that far, you're stopping it and being able to route it a lot faster. Exactly. Okay. The other big thing is understanding how you're going to grade your effectiveness and your results. In the past, you see a lot of people, they want to grade these third-party merchandisers on coverage percent, right? So I sent you 10 things to do, you did 10 things, thanks. The third-party merchandisers themselves want to get off that model because they know there is huge value. And we've been able to prove it time and time again looking at sales data, right? So when I send a rep out, I see an uptick in sales. So what I need to be is good stewards of both that third-party merchandiser's time and the money for the supplier that we're sending the task out. So I want to reduce the number of tasks I send and just make them highly accurate. All right? I'd rather be more conservative but send out the ones I know and then prioritize those tasks.
With greater ROI.
Greater ROIs. We've actually had private label guys who negative margin items. And without thinking about it, now all of a sudden they're sending task out on a negative margin item, which has its place. It may be something you want to do if you're trying to build a brand. There's always reasons to have a negative margin item. But for them at that time, it was an aha moment of saying, hey, we want to stop that. We absolutely do not want to send task on a negative margin item. We're just spending throwing more money after that and going further in the hole. So the big takeaways is being able to understand, know your items, pick the guy that works the best for it, but dashboard it yourself. Pick one that's transparent and gives you the results back and doesn't hide them from you. That's a huge thing. So being able to get those results back, seeing how the rep's performing, and that comes into, it may be a marketing issue, right? You may have an item that absolutely needs to be sent up, be more promotion dollars, or it may be just in the wrong place because we keep generating, hey, this should be selling more and it's not. And the rep keeps telling us, well, it's there, it's on the shelf.
Can you get the store of the community right?
Yeah, and that could be a big part of it. It could be you just have a competitor in that space in a local store that's outselling you on that particular product that you may not have nationally. So, but understanding that feedback loop is huge.
All right. Well, Shawn, thank you very much. And we are out of time for now, but we appreciate you taking the time to join us. And as always, if you have questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. The email address is saturday@8thandwalton.com. Again, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next Saturday morning.